We will to parachute all the guns of the force. Get ready. Airborne from skies of blue. Ready to go. We're coming. Make your jumps and take your bows today. Let's go. Put on your boots. Your jumping boots. Your parachute. Your parachute. Get all those bars.
We're like 1 minute away from starting. Hi everyone, I am Melissa Miller. I am a former survivalist on the TV show Naked and Afraid. It's on Discovery Channel. Raise your hand if you've never heard of the TV show Naked and Afraid or have no idea what it is. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So it's just a recap. It is a survival challenge, and you have nothing. You're kind of thrown out there with basically nothing really but a couple of items. You might get like a knife, you might get a fire starter, and you usually get like one item. It's a really hard survival challenge. In my opinion, it is the hardest challenge anybody can do because honestly, you don't have clothes. That's what the hardest part is. And before I applied to that show, I had the opportunity to teach wilderness survival courses for several years at a nature preservation. It was one of my favorite jobs on earth. And so I'm a little out of the loop of teaching, so forgive me for being a little nervous, but I will, I'm going to cover some basics that, obviously you can't cover wilderness survival in 30 minutes. There are so many components of it. And wilderness survival is really one of those things that you just got to get out there on the field and learn with experience because it's super time consuming, it's super tedious, and there's so much like failure in wilderness survival before you're successful. You watch TV shows like Naked and Afraid, and they'll show somebody catching a fish, and you don't realize how many failed attempts go into catching that fish, how many hours go into standing outside and just waiting for that fish to come, or especially to make like something like a fish basket trap. Those can take like 2 days to make, just to collect all the resources and do all the weaving. Everything looks so simplified on a survival TV show, but all of it's really tedious and it's really exhausting. But to make it through a TV show like Naked and Afraid, you have to survive out there for 3 weeks. And pretty much anybody can do that with a few common basic knowledge, skill set, and a whole lot of fortitude and grit. But you really only need to know some basic things to really master to be able to survive a couple of weeks out in the wilderness. So how many, do any of you, when you go, are any hikers here? Anybody who likes to go hiking? Okay, so I like to go hiking a lot, and I don't always do it, there's a couple items that I like to keep on me at all times, just to make sure if, God forbid, a situation comes up where I get lost, I'm prepared. So we're going to talk about some of those items that I like to carry with me, and we're going to talk about some basic rules of survival. So there's this really common phrase in the realm of wilderness survival. It's the rules of three. Now, the rules of three are that you can, in extreme situations, survive 3 minutes without air. You can survive 3 hours without shelter in extreme conditions. So that's if there's snow, really, hypothermic situations. You can survive 3 days without water. And you can survive 3 weeks without food. That one's a little bit more lenient. You can actually usually go a lot longer without food. You'd be surprised. There's a man, I think he went almost 300 days without food because he had enough fat stores to survive that long. But general rule is you want to get shelter, you want to get fire, and you want to get water, and then you want to get food. So that, I would say, is the most important rule. Like, if you ever got lost, just remember that word. I need to get my shelter first. I need to get my fire second. I need to get my water, and then I need to get my food. And that's because they all kind of follow in this order. So when you're out there, the first thing you need something over your head. Because in a day like today, we're learning it firsthand. What happens when you get wet? You get cold. And during the daytime, it might be a comfortable 70, 80 degrees, but at nighttime, that temperature drops. And your body core temperature can sink really low, and if you get wet, and you can't get dry, you're screwed. You are, in most environments, you are screwed. And that's why finding shelter in a wilderness survival situation is so important. So what's a way we could find shelter? I'm gonna be asking questions. Please raise your hand. There are no stupid answers. I love I'm gonna be asking some questions, or just kind of shout it out. What's a way, if I need shelter, I'm in the wilderness, what's a good thing I could look for shelter?
A fallen tree.
A fallen tree, absolutely. Anything else? Cave, yeah. Oh, if you're lucky, if you're in cave territory. Where I'm from, we don't have caves. So the thought of coming across a cave would be like the most awesome thing. So I've always practiced, I'm from Michigan. We don't have caves in my territory. So I always try to practice off the fallen tree. You can always make that if I recommended to learn how to do one basic survival skill, it would be how to make a decent rain-proof shelter. And you can do that from a fallen tree. I would look, you can take a big branch, you can break it down, stack other branches on top of that, and then put your leaves. There's a whole bunch of types of primitive shelters you can build. Shelter, cave. Okay, what if we're in, God forbid, really snowy weather?
Igloo.
Yeah, you can make certain types of igloo structures. Though that is time consuming and does require skill set, but yeah, that's just another thing. You can also, another really quick, in a snow situation, a quick way to make a shelter where there's a ton of snow is you would put all your pack and all your material on the ground, and you would actually bury a bunch of snow over that, and you could actually start to make, so you have all your stuff buried in the snow, and you actually are creating a little cave, and you could pat snow around that. Now, so we need shelter. What are some things that you could carry in your backpack on you to be prepared in a survival situation if you need shelter like right away?
A knife.
Yes, so one of the most important survival tools is a knife. I always have a knife with on me. It's number one. So a knife is probably number one most important thing to carry in your survival, or one of the most important things to carry in your survival kit. Another thing that I highly recommend for shelter is always having one of these on you. Just have one of these in your backpack at all times. A knife and an emergency poncho. It's just such a good thing. Always bring a raincoat. This right here can also be a lot more than a poncho. What else can I use? What else could I use a poncho for in a survival situation?
A tent, a lean-to, catch water.
So water collection, I heard that. We can also use it as a tent. And this is we can hang this over, find a downed branch. We can hang this over that downed tree, and we have a makeshift shelter. Water collection. What's another thing I could use this for?
To wear.
What?
To wear.
Absolutely, to wear. This one's kind of opaque. This could maybe serve as some sort of sun protection too. What's another thing?
A solar still.
Oh, sorry. A still shelter. Okay, so that's good. What could I use? So there's some other things I could. Let's say I'm getting a little cold. What could I use this for? So I could use this as a blanket.
Use it as insulation.
I can use this as insulation. What's another thing I could use to help me make shelter? To maybe put some sticks together. I could tear this apart and I could use it as cordage. I could twist these. I could use this as cordage, and I can create some relatively strong cordage, especially with this. Another thing that I could use this for, believe it or not, is I could use this to boil water. A lot of people, you can actually fill this up with water, you can secure it up at the top, and you can put this over a fire. And it will not burn a hole through the bag, it will boil water in the bag because the water, it's only as hot as the water inside it. So believe it or not, you could hold this over a fire and you could boil water with this bag. And it's always crazy to watch. It still blows my mind every time. You can do that with a paper cup. You can boil water in a paper cup and it'll burn all the paper around the cup, but it won't burn the water inside the paper cup. Another, you could use, what was the other one I was just thinking of? Oh, you could use this, yeah, as insulation. You could use it as a neck wrap. What about first aid applications?
Tourniquet.
You could use this as a tourniquet. You could use this to adhere a band-aid or some sort. You know, if God forbid you break your leg or break your arm, you could use this to make cordage to tie a splint to your leg. So when it comes to wilderness survival, a big part of it is being resourceful. You could even use this as a rescue symbol. If someone's coming up above, you're waving this. You know, a fun little thing about rescue and SOS symbols is people flying overhead pay attention. They pay attention to movement more than anything. There's something in the human eye that is able to see movement. So if you need a rescue symbol, it's always good to make sure there's a lot of movement. So that's another thing I just like to always talk when wilderness survival, a lot of times it's about being resourceful and using the items that you have on hand. And this has many uses. Another big thing I could think about this is it would be great for collecting firewood. It would be great, you could make this into a sack, because carrying around a bunch of twigs and such is not fun. So yeah, there's just so many applications for something like this. It's less than an ounce and it takes up a very small amount of space in your backpack. If you're ever going on a hike, you should always carry a form of shelter. So shelter is the most important thing in survival. So just always make sure to have something to have your bases covered when it comes to shelter. And if you're ever, wanting to do a fun activity with the family, go in, and you have the land to do it, go practice shelter building. When I taught wilderness survival, it was so fun to teach kids because they would find so much pride in building a shelter. And it's also teaching your kids like a necessary skill, or a skill that can become very useful. So shelter is number one most important thing. You can find ways to make in the wild, or you can bring things to keep you prepared. So that you have some source of shelter. Another thing is an emergency blanket is this one's also really good, double as a signal, obviously. It's something that I'll carry with me often. So yeah, shelter is number one. And you also need shelter, and that moves me to my next order of importance thing that we need. So we have shelter over our head. Does anyone know what the next thing we want to get is?
Fire.
So we want to get fire, and that's because you think water, right? Naturally you'd be like, I need to get water. But you can't boil water if you don't have fire. So it's kind of, if you want to make sure that you're putting your shelter near a water source, if you can. And you don't want to go, well, I'll get into that later. So if you're prepared, another thing I always carry with me in my pack to be prepared for a wilderness survival situation is some sort of water filtration. This is a mini water filter straw. I'm kind of indifferent about these. Some people love them, some people don't like these. But you can actually take the straw cap off, you can hold this up to a water source, and you can drink directly from just about any river, lake, and it filtrates the water for you. There's little mini water pump systems, which I actually prefer, that you can carry a full water filtration systems. You can get like this big. Another really lightweight but not long-term option are water purification tablets. You can carry these with you, but of course if you have these, you need to make sure you also have a container, to put them in. But this is another thing that you can carry on with you to make sure you're always prepared for a wilderness survival situation in terms of water. But if you don't have water, if you don't have those, what are some ways you could collect water in the wilderness? Anyone? Yeah, so you could use rainwater collection is a way that you can collect water.
Clothing.
Yep, so you can also use, so when you say boots, what do you mean? Or
Yours look like they're fairly solid, I think.
oh, like they could hold them as water collection. That's actually a great, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I could take this boot off, and this one's made of all leather, it is waterproof. And yeah, I don't know how well it would retain water, but I could probably use this boot to collect water. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, if you got a pair of shoes with a tight enough seal, you could use boots, absolutely. Another thing is you could use the reservoir, the poncho, collect rain into that. Another thing is if in the morning when you have the morning condensation, if you have an extra piece of cloth or a bandana or a blanket or something like that, you can walk around and you can actually swipe your clothing on the plant condensation, and you can wring that into a water collection tool. That's another way. If you have zero way, I always really advise against drinking any water that's unboiled or unfiltered. But if you have absolutely zero way of purifying your water, I don't even like to say this, but if you need water, it's been day 3, day 4, and you feel like you're gonna die of dehydration, I always, you want to find a flowing source, preferably if you can obviously find it from a source that's flowing from high up, because as the water flows from higher up, it's going through a lot of filtration processes. So that's if you have to drink unfiltered water, that's another way. Another way you can always get water is digging, but that takes an insane amount of time and an insane amount of calories. So that's another really hard source. That's why I'm always like, man, bring in some sort of water filtration device or some sort of container that you have that you can boil water in is just really, really important. So fire, I kind of went out of order there, but we need to get fire, obviously, before we can think about getting water. Because fire doesn't only provide something to boil our water with. What else does fire provide?
Psychological advantage.
Yeah, it provides psychological events, but what's warmth? Warmth it provides warmth. It also provides a way to cook our food if we're lucky enough to get food. So heat is really important. I remember when I was out on the TV show, I would get really close to the fire. I would straddle the fire. I actually, on one of my challenges, I burned off the tips of my hair because I was sleeping so close to the fire. I got, the fire was really important for me. So when it comes to fire, you can carry a lighter, right? But I always recommend carrying a ferro rod, because these babies are waterproof and they will last a lot longer. And you can find a fireproof ferro rod at Walmart for like $5. I also actually, for the longest time, this is called a Mora. I think it's like a $20 knife. Mora Light My Fire. Oh, one moment. Watch me cut myself doing a demonstration. There we go. This is a Mora Light My Fire. This is one of my first knives I've ever seen. And this one actually comes in with a built-in, oh gosh. I got stuck with the pine resin. Okay. I brought pine resin. I'll show you what that's for. I haven't used this in many years. So this is a great knife to carry because it comes with a ferro rod integrated into the handle. And another thing that I always look for when thinking of a good survival knife is I want a knife that can strike a ferro rod. And when I mean that, I mean a knife with a nice, sharp 90-degree spine. So this top of the knife right here, because you don't want to strike with the edge of your knife. That's going to dull your knife. You want to strike it with the tip of your spine. So the tip of your spine, when I'm thinking of a good survival knife, I want a spine that can strike my ferro rod and throw out a good spark. But this is a great knife and great little combination because you can find a lot of knives that come with ferro rods. It's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, bringing a means of fire is really important because how the heck are you going to make a fire out in the wilderness? There's only a couple of ways. There's one way you can stand there and pray that lightning's going to strike the tree next to you. That's probably not going to happen. And then the other ways that are well known in primitive technology are the bow drill and the hand drill, aka a friction fire. I couldn't find the bow that I made, but this is a bow drill that I've used many times, and this is something that unless you practice and learn how to make this specifically, you're not going to be able to just pick up this skill. So that's why I always recommend taking a waterproof fire starter with you when you're going on a hike or there's any potential to get lost. Just make sure you have a way to start fire, because making something like this, it's actually really hard to do it. I almost originally was going to do my class on how to make a primitive fireboard, but it just, honestly, I was like, I don't know if I want to do a fireboard demonstration. I was really nervous because I get really nervous when I do it in front of people. But this is a whole process, and making something like do you guys know what a bow drill is? When I'm showing this, you guys know what this is? Okay, it's a friction fire. You have your hearth board, you have your spindle, you have what is called your handhold, which is usually a rock of some sort, and you have the bow, and then you string this string between the bow, and then you use that, you wrap that bow around this little thing, and it'll turn the spindle, and it'll create friction. But creating these in the wilderness are really hard because you also have to find something to make the cordage. So, if you're lucky, you'll find a dead animal carcass and know how to make sinew. But even making the wood for the hearth board and the spindle, usually these are two different types of woods. This one's got to have a certain type of hardness. This one's got to have a certain type of hardness. It's like a whole thing. So what I'm saying is just bring your fire starter. And there are some other cool things so when I was in the Amazon jungle, I was so excited because I came across a tree that produced a flammable resin. And a lot of people don't know that there are tons of trees out there that produce flammable resins that have turpentine. So pine trees are one of those trees. This is pine tree resin. I actually collected this in the city because the city will manicure their pine trees and they cut their branches for them to look nice and pretty. And those trees where the branches get cut on the pine trees, they'll seep the pine tree sap. And in the survival world, we call this stuff gold. This is the pine tree resin, and it's like liquid gold because it burns forever. I'm going to burn this piece. I'm going to light this on fire, and just look at how tiny this single, actually let's get a nicer piece. And I'll just show you guys why the pine tree resin is such a wonderful survival tool. So let's get a flame to it. Okay, so now, there are actually some entire brands that make fire starters based on pine trees and pine resin. And so when I go back to the idea of being resourceful, this is from a pine tree. What's another way I can use a pine tree as a survival tool?
You make tea out of needles.
So you can make tea. So pine trees are phenomenal because they cover pretty much every aspect of wilderness survival. So pine trees are phenomenal for fire. You get the pine resin right here with this natural terpenes that burns forever. So they're good for fire. Pine trees produce this resin. Another thing pine trees have are fatwood. This is actually a piece of fatwood right here from a pine tree. This is loaded with that resin, and the fatwood from a pine tree will burn long, it'll burn hot, and it'll burn really well and be a wonderful survival fire. You can also use the pine cones and pine needles for tinder to start a fire. Pine trees, if you're lucky, you might find pine nuts in the pine cones, so you can use them as food. A bush or a survival type of coffee is made with pine tree needles. You can soak pine tree needles in boiling water. They leak a lot of nutrients, and you can drink that in the morning for a pick-me-up, or if you don't have any coffee. Another thing that pine trees provide is the sap, which you can actually turn into you can use the sap for medicinal purposes. Another thing you can use pine trees for is shelter building. You can use pine needles for insulation. When you sleep, you don't want to sleep on the ground in a survival situation. That's another important part of shelter. Separating yourself from the ground. I'm trying to think, gosh, what else could you use a pine tree for? Obviously, you can use their branches to build shelter, but pine trees are really like a miracle survival thing. So I just named food, fire, shelter, water, and medical care from a single plant. And that's why when you go back to thinking about survival. It's all about learning how to be resourceful. The more you're out there, the more resourceful you're going to be. Another thing, oh man, time is going by quick. So cordage. Sorry. I always carry some cordage with me. Paracord's good. The thing I love, if I'm going to recommend a good cordage to carry, 550 paracord goes a long way. Does anyone know why 550 paracord is so awesome as a survival
Because you
cord?
can gut it, and you can use
You can
the
gut
studs.
it.
You can make snares out of it.
Absolutely. So on its surface, this looks like pretty average cordage, but one of the things that I love about 550 paracord is you can, when he says gut it, you can open it up and it has all these micro strands inside it, and you can turn these into strands. You can use these for fishing line, you can use these for snare ties, you can use these for shelter building is probably the number one thing. You can use these to adhere spear tips. You can use all those, so that's a wonderful thing. You guys see how that's still burning long and strong? I should have set a timer. How long would you say this has been burning for? Probably,
Over 5 minutes.
yeah, probably 2-3 minutes. So I'm going to set the timer just so I can see how much longer it burns. It burns pretty long. But yeah, cordage is a hugely important part of your survival kit. You can use it to do just about anything. And now that all being said, the last important thing, so we got fire, we got water, we have shelter. The last important thing you want to think about is getting food. And if you really want to be prepared, there are some portable lightweight things you can carry in your pack to acquire food. Slingshots are a highly underrated item that are a great survival. This one's kind of like, it's literally like a professional slingshot. But the thing about slingshots is that you can make pretty much ammo out of anything, and they have a lot of power. You can kill squirrels, birds, you can kill a lot. You can even, heck, if you get a fish close enough to the water, maybe you could snack one of those, startle it, catch it. Slingshots are a great portable way. Anybody who's into archery here? Any archers in here? Okay, a lot of archers. Man, pick up a slingshot if you ever can and look on some YouTube videos to do it, because they're really, the thing I love about slingshots, I'm into traditional archery. And I like a slingshot because it's a portable way to practice traditional archery in essence. And they're really fun. I just started doing slingshots this year actually, and I wish I would have started sooner. But if you can pick up some slingshot skills, they're really easy to practice and learn if you know some basic things. And if you really want to be prepared, heck, throw a slingshot in your kit and get used to it. Another fun and portable way, this is another thing I recently acquired that I'm really excited about. This is a hand line reel, and it's portable, really lightweight, 3D printed. This one's by a company called Crystal Creek, and this is a fishing line. So I have this little hand reel right here, fishing line. This particular kit, now if you want, you can just carry this and a couple of hooks with you, but this kit also comes with a little, it's got like some little bobbers in there, and then this one also comes with some hooks and a little kit. So this is a fun little portable way to make sure your bases of your food bases are covered. This was my item when on my first Naked and Afraid challenge, when I went to the Amazon jungle. This was my item of choice. I brought a handrail, and it ended up feeding us a lot of food. On my first few days in, I was able to find a boa and eat that, and then I was able to gut that boa and use those guts to fish piranha, and then use those dead piranha guts to fish more piranha. So this was a lifesaver for me on my first challenge. It fed me and my partner really well, and yeah, it's also just a really fun thing to carry in case you ever come across a creek or a stream. You can throw one out and go fishing. That all being said, I think another really two rules that I always like to instill in people when it comes to survival. Always tell somebody where you're going. If you're going on a hike, please make sure you tell people. That way you're never found in a situation where nobody knows where you are, because that's obviously just terrible. So always tell people where you're going to go, where you're going to be. And another kind of seemingly counterintuitive rule of survival. If you get to a point where you are completely lost and you have realized that you are totally lost, and you kind of get to that point where you're starting to walk and everything's looking the same, stop where you are and stay in that area. And I cannot stress that enough, because if you have told somebody, granted you told someone, did the first rule where you told somebody where you are, where you're going to be, if you stop and stay where you are, search and rescue will find you. Eventually they're going to find you within the next couple of days. If you can stay where you are, get a shelter over your head so you are protected from the rain, get some insulation on the ground so you can sit on that over the night, I would recommend staying where you are, because search and rescue will dispatch. If you keep walking, you can cover 10, 20 miles in a day and get away from your initial location. So that's really, I just say, if you are totally lost and know you're totally lost, stay in that spot. This actually happened to me on Naked and Afraid, and they didn't even air it. It was one of the scariest situations. I was in the jungle, and it was about I actually told my producer, I said, if you leave me, I'm going to get lost, because I did not have my bearings. And and he said, no, you'll be fine. I go, no, I won't. And guess what? I got lost. So about 2 hours had passed, and I realized, I said, I was lost. I got really scared. I was like, oh my gosh, everything looked like the same jungle. I started circling. I started seeing it like girl dies on TV show. My parents reading that news article. I started seeing all these things in my head, and I go, Melissa, stop and just listen to what you know to do. And so I sat down on this log, and I just stayed there. And granted enough, like only 2 hours passed, and I hear, Melissa, and I go, I'm here. And so they found me. Luckily I wasn't out there, but I was like, just listen to your own advice and sit on this log, and they'll find you. They'll come back. They're gonna realize you're gone eventually. So if you get super lost, establish a shelter, stay where you are. Remember, you can go weeks without food. You'll be fine. It's the water and the shelter that you want, and the fire that you want to care about. But you can even go up to 3, maybe more days without water. And by that time, search and rescue is going to find you. So just stay where you are. That was burning for about 7 minutes, by the way, that little tiny piece. Okay. I tried to get as much information as I could, but now I have I just want to make sure that you guys all, it is 11:30, and I don't know what's scheduled for after me. So if there was something that you wanted to go to after that, you can be on your way. And for those of you, what is scheduled after? Oh, thank you. So 11. Okay, so there is music in the courtyard from 11 to 12, and then we have at 12 p.m. Arkansas Living Treasure announcement and recognition in the courtyard. So yeah, I can take some questions right now. And by the way, I will be doing a presentation talking about my experiences on Naked and Afraid. I'll be doing that at 4:30 in, I don't know. I think I'm going to have to wait. I don't know if it's going to be in a gym or if it's going to be here. I think because it's scheduled for the pavilion, I believe. The farmer's tent?
That's right in front of the courthouse.
Right in front of the courthouse, and it is sheltered?
It's a covered picnic area.
Okay, so then we'll probably...
But also, all people there earlier than they usually do.
Okay, so I think it would probably be best just to say, let's meet there, right? And then if we need to move it, we'll move it, right? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Melissa, thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and if you have any questions, just raise your hand, or any good, all good? Okay. Don't be shy.
Fight, we will, and perish all the guns of the foe.